You met someone, and within hours, maybe days, they'd told you things. Their worst memory, their biggest fear, the thing they said they'd never told anyone before. And something happened inside you that felt like recognition. Like finally, like this is the person who actually sees me. Because look at how much they trust me. You felt chosen. You weren't chosen. You were next. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly why it felt like a soulmate connection, and why that feeling was your brain doing something completely predictable. Not something rare, something your brain does every time. What this is not before anything else, let me tell you what this isn't. It's not a story about being naive. The most psychologically sophisticated people you'll ever meet have felt exactly this. It's not a failure of intelligence. It's not a story about manipulation. Most people who do this aren't aware they're doing it. They're running a pattern, not running a plan. And it's not a story about something that wasn't real. The feeling was real. The brain chemistry was real. What was missing was one thing. Time. This is a story about how intimacy is supposed to feel, and how your brain can't always tell the difference between the real thing and a very convincing imitation. There's a name for what happened, a mechanism. And once you see it, the soulmate feeling makes complete sense. And so does the collapse that followed. Chapter 1, Nadia. I want to tell you about a woman named Nadia. She's 29, careful with people, not someone who falls easily or often. She's been hurt before, not dramatically, just slowly, and she's learned to take her time. She meets someone at a friend's dinner. First conversation. He talks about his father, a complicated relationship, something he says he's never said out loud before, at least not like this.
What is that?
She listens. Something shifts in her chest, not attraction exactly. Recognition. Second conversation. His childhood, a wound she knows from the inside. She starts sharing back things she'd normally take months to say. Things she keeps carefully behind the part of herself she shows people. By week 2, they've had conversations that feel like year 3. She tells her closest friend, "I've never felt this way this fast. I think he might be the one." She has no way of knowing something she can't know yet. He's had this exact conversation with 4 other people. Not because he's cruel, because this, the opening, the confession, the sudden depth, is the only intimacy he's ever learned to create. She didn't fall for him. She fell for the feeling of being trusted. And those aren't the same thing. To understand why that feeling was so convincing, why it felt like fate, instead of a pattern, you need to understand what your brain does when someone tells you a secret. Chapter 2, what your brain does with a secret. When someone shares something deeply personal with you, 2 things happen at the same time. You feel closer to them, and you feel a pull to share back. Not a choice, a reflex. It fires before you've decided anything. In the 1970s, psychologist Sidney Girard spent years documenting this. He called it the disclosure reciprocity effect. What he found was simple. Vulnerability is contagious. When someone opens up, your brain doesn't ask whether they meant to. It just responds. Your brain has one question when someone tells you a secret. Am I special to them? It doesn't ask, do they do this with everyone? Real intimacy builds in layers, slow ones. You share a little, they share a little, time passes, you trust what you've seen, then you go deeper. Each layer earns the next. That's how it's supposed to work. Premature disclosure skips all of that. Your brain feels the depth. It doesn't register that the depth has no time underneath it. And then, limerence kicks in. That's the brain chemistry of early intense attachment: dopamine, norepinephrine, the whole architecture. Helen Fisher scanned people's brains while they looked at photos of someone they'd just fallen for. The activity looked almost identical to obsessive-compulsive disorder. Premature disclosure puts you into that state faster than anything else. Real intimacy is slow, not because people are holding back, because trust isn't a feeling. Trust is a record. But here's the part that's harder to name. What happened wasn't just about what they did. It's about what you did in response. And why. Chapter 3, What You Did When Someone Shares Deeply. The reciprocity reflex fires. You share back. Things you'd normally take months to say. Things that live behind the careful version of yourself you usually send into the world. Things that are true and real, but that you wouldn't hand to someone you've known for 2 weeks. And here's what that does. You invest. Your brain doesn't just track what they gave you. It tracks what you gave them, and suddenly, without choosing to enter it, you have skin in the game. The more you share back, the more invested you become. The more invested you become, the more your brain reads everything through the lens of, this is significant. The brain commits to its own investment. It's not being fooled from the outside. It's convincing itself from the inside. And then there's the part that's the hardest to see while it's happening. You didn't fall in love with them. You fell in love with the version of yourself you became in that conversation. The one who finally said the things out loud. And that version felt so real, so much more real than your usual self, because something in it was real, which is exactly what makes it so hard to let go of when it falls apart. Chapter 4, The Collapse, the Intensity that felt like depth has no foundation beneath it. Real intimacy is built on shared experience over time, on showing up consistently, on conflict and repair, on ordinary days that don't carry the electricity of the first conversations. What you had was real depth, but depth without structure. And when real life arrived, inconsistency, ordinary silence, the mundane texture of what a relationship actually is, there was nothing holding it. They pull back, or they find the next person to have the conversation with. Either way, the intensity disappears, and what's left is a strange, particular grief. Mourning something that never fully existed. Something that felt more real than most real things. Something your body still remembers even when your mind knows it's gone. And then the question arrives, what did I do wrong? Why did it feel so real and then become so nothing? Why do I keep ending up here? You weren't too much. You weren't too fast. You weren't naive. You were trusting a signal that looked exactly like the real thing. Because it was built to. Because if any of that landed the grief of something that felt so real and then became so nothing that feeling is accurate. Something real did happen. What was missing wasn't your feeling. What was missing was time. Keep going. Chapter 5, The Other Side. Most conversations about this frame the person who shared too soon as a predator, a manipulator, someone who knew what they were doing. That framing is satisfying. It's also usually wrong. Most people who do this aren't aware they're doing it. They're running a connection pattern they learned somewhere, often from a family system where emotional intensity was the only closeness available, where the dramatic confession was the only intimacy anyone knew how to make, where depth was compressed into moments because the moments were all there was. They're not hunting, they're searching, and they find, over and over, that the initial intensity doesn't hold. The connection that felt so real collapses. They don't understand why. Either, this doesn't make what happened to you smaller. It doesn't ask you to forgive on a timeline you're not ready for. But it does mean there's no one to punish. Just two people whose patterns met, and one of them got hurt significantly more than the other. They weren't a liar who told the truth too fast. They were someone who only knew how to begin. Beginning was the only intimacy they'd ever learned. So what actually changes? Not in how you judge them, in how you recognize it the next time it arrives wearing the same face. Chapter 6, What Actually Changes the Feeling will still arrive. That's not the part that changes. Rules don't reach a nervous system that's already felt the dopamine of someone trusting you with their worst thing. Knowing the name of what's happening doesn't stop it from happening. What changes is one question. Not about them, about the pattern. Is this person showing me who they are? Or are they showing me everything they carry? Those aren't the same thing. The first one reveals character. The second reveals wounds. Both are real, both can matter, but only one is a foundation. Character is visible in small things over time. How they handle disappointment, whether they show up when it costs them something, whether they're consistent on ordinary days, not just the ones with electricity. Wounds are visible immediately. In the first hour, in what spills out before there's any real reason to trust it. Both are real. Only one tells you who they'll be in a year. And then notice what you're actually feeling. Specifically, are you feeling close to them? Or are you feeling close to the version of yourself you became in that conversation? The one who finally said the things you needed to say, in a space that felt safe enough to say them. That experience is real. It doesn't have to belong to them to be yours. The next soulmate feeling deserves one question before it becomes a certainty. Does this person know me yet? Or do they only know what I told them? The feeling was real. The brain chemistry was real. The conversations were real. The things you said that you'd never said before, those were real too. What was missing wasn't your feeling. What was missing was time. And time is the only thing that tells you whether someone's depth is genuine or whether they've simply learned that depth is the fastest way to feel less alone. You weren't fooled by a lie. You were moved by something that looked exactly like what you've been looking for. The difference between that and the real thing isn't how it feels in the first week. It's how it holds in the first year. A soulmate isn't someone who tells you everything. A soulmate is someone who's still there after the telling. If this named something you've been carrying, leave one word in the comments. Just one. The feeling. The person. The moment you realized. You don't need to explain it. The people reading the comments will understand exactly what you mean. I'll read every single one. And if this described someone in your life, someone you've been trying to understand, or someone you've been trying to explain yourself, to share it with them. Sometimes the right words arrive before the right conversation. Subscribe not because this channel has answers, but because next time, we go into something directly connected to this. Why the people who need the most love are often the ones who make themselves the hardest to reach. It goes even deeper into the same pattern. I'll see you in the next one.